Hello and welcome to the HCA Succession After Show. My name is Sharronda Williams and I will be your host for today's episode. And joining me for an in-depth discussion about Succession Season 3, Episode 3, we have Will Mavity. Hi, Will.
Hi, I'm sorry I didn't wear a costume today. I really should have to get in the spirit.
And next up, we have Rasha Goel. Hi, Rasha.
Hi, Sharronda. Hi, Will. Same, but happy Halloween, everyone.
You did wear a costume, right? Isn't that what this is?
Kind of retro, I guess, right?
Yeah, I thought you were the MTV logo. I was.
Thanks, Will. Something to think about. Thank you.
Well, first, happy Halloween, everyone, so that celebrates. But before we jump into today's conversation, here are a few things that you should know about the show. The Succession After Show will contain spoilers for the current episode and previous episodes of Succession. Each week, we'll be breaking down what happens on each episode. This includes a recap of the show, as well as our favorite moments and favorite lines of dialogue, and what we expect to see in next week's episode. If you missed the episode of Succession and you don't want to be spoiled, pause this video, watch the episodes, and then come back and then watch our recap. This week's Succession episode is called The Disruption, and it is written by Ted Cohen and Georgia Pritchett and directed by Cathy Yan. The plot for this week's episode is as follows. With the DOJ at the door, Logan summons in his arsenal, while Tom makes a potentially life-changing offer. Meanwhile, Kendall becomes obsessed with his own takedown. So going into this week's episode, can you just give me a little bit of how you felt about the episode? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Did you want more? Rasha, we'll start with you.
You know, it was interesting, guys, because at first I felt like it was a little slow for me. But then as we get midway through, it really started picking up. And I started seeing all these different things happening, with the dynamics of Kendall and the family. And I feel like Kendall's kind of going crazy, but at the same time, I feel a little sorry for him because I feel like he's really all on his own. Of course, you see Logan and just everything just getting more and more intensified with him because he's basically trying to save his ass and his company and whatever he can. And so you really start seeing the struggle and a massive disruption, not only between the family members themselves, but even all these internal struggles. And I know we're going to get more into it. So there's a bunch of things that were coming to my mind, but the ending, oh my gosh, that really blew me away with the FBI, but we will talk more about that.
And Will, how about you?
Yeah, I'm glad to know I wasn't alone in the first half of the episode. I would say I was definitely wondering, like, okay, where are we going with this? I thought things would be moving faster. Felt like it was treading water. But the last 25 minutes or so are just riveting. And by the end, I mean, I'm gripped. I need to know what happens next week. I'm really finding Kendall pretty repulsive this season. Like, I do feel bad for him, but I was really rooting for him at the end of last season. But just every opportunity for him to make the wrong decision, he takes. And he's alienating everyone needlessly, like completely burned his bridges with Shiv. And he's, pushing Greg away with that whole thing with the watch. So I really find him remarkably unsympathetic at this point. But his dad is obviously, ill-equipped in this situation too. So it's, I'm very curious to see kind of who's going to emerge from this, because I don't think it can be Kendall as long sustainably as like the face of, is the alternate choice for Logan.
I am scared now. Well, you are repulsed by Kendall. I mean, Kendall definitely is not likable this season so far. As you said last week, Kendall really gets into his own way. But I guess for the first question that I want to ask both of you, we could start with Kendall. What is your perception? We open up the episode. We see that Kendall is having a lunch interview. And essentially, he is being interviewed by this woman, which he does not let her really get a word out. But she does ask one question. And she basically wants to know about the relationship between Kendall and his other siblings. And she wants to know kind of, is this relationship rocky? Are they as good as ever? And, he makes this comment of basically saying that he's in a good head place right now. And essentially, he knows that things are a little trouble between him and his siblings, but they're still okay. And he hopes that they're in a good headspace as well. So Rasha, what were your thoughts about this comment that Kendall makes to the reporter?
You know, it's so funny you mentioned that because that whole headspace thing really stayed with me for a little bit. Um, I think that he's really gotten to the point where so I'm not repulsed by him. I actually kind of feel bad for him. I think he's going kind of crazy and he needs a little bit of mental help and just a team that supports him because at this point, I think he's realized that him and his siblings are really not going to help each other out. Like there is that fine divide between him and them. And regardless of the fact that, yes, they're siblings and they're family, but I feel like internally he feels alone because even at this luncheon, I think she made a point at one point in there that, Kendall, you really care about how people look at you or what they think about you. And even though he comes off as this macho guy at moments where he's like, I got this, I know what I'm doing. I felt in this scene, there was still that little vulnerability where you could feel like, inside he might be hurting, but he's not going to let us see that. And I think at this point, he really just cares about his headspace. I know he's trying to think about them and just trying to make it look like, yeah, they're close and doesn't really want to open up too much to her. But I think inside, like he keeps telling himself, like, I feel good. I know how I'm doing. I'm good. We saw this in the last episode too. So, and then we see that whole headspace comment kind of trickle down. You see Shiv and Roman walking in the hallway, having that conversation. And then Roman referring to that with dad as well. Like, was my dad's headspace. So anyhow, I thought that was kind of funny that in that first few moments, the word headspace is just thrown around between all these characters.
And Will, what was your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think you're right that he's going crazy. I thought it was pretty fascinating. Throughout the episode, he just repeatedly is trying so hard to appear like criticism doesn't bother him. And he gets obsessed with it. Like his whole game in the car where they're reading out the bad tweets about him. And then like they read out one that just completely says like, he feels guilty and he's insecure. And this is like a measure of atonement. He's mentally ill and needs help. And, you can just see everyone in the car recognizes, yeah, that's spot on. And they turn it into like this, that one sucked chant. But it's, he really just comes across as kind of pathetic in this situation in that he's so unwilling to admit that criticism hurts him. And, you see it come to a head. And that's what I'm saying. I don't think he's going to work as an alternative to Logan because by the end of the episode, he's just curled up in a ball, watching himself get roasted on video. And I didn't think he was going to handle this civil war against his dad this badly because Logan Roy is many things, but I guess it has always been an advantage. He does not give a fuck what people think about him, and I think this shows that maybe Kendall has a killer instinct, but he doesn't have everything else that goes with it to really withstand a big fight and to head a media company like his dad does.
Well, here's a question that I have for the both of you. Because in this episode, through social media, through conversations with Kendall's siblings, we hear them talk a lot about where is his headspace. And more specifically, we talk about the mental illness that he could be potentially dealing with, but also to his previous bouts with addiction. And so I wanted to ask the both of you, do you feel as though Kendall is actually still using? Because we haven't actually seen him do anything, but we can definitely tell that Kendall is somewhat unstable from where we met him at the end of season 2, even going into now in episode 3 of season 3. And we'll start with you.
Yeah, didn't they mention early on, I think in the first episode, that he was actively in a recovery program that he'd been attending? So I'm not sure where he's at, but he definitely comes across like he's coked up in a lot of, he feels very manic sometimes when he's like, yeah, let's go ahead, let's get on the show. And he's not listening to his lawyer. He's not listening to anyone. So I would not be surprised if it comes out later this season that he's still using coke at the very least.
I was going to say the same, Will. Yeah, because there's those moments where you see him just acting so impulsively, like he's not thought about it. Especially let's look at that limo drive, right? To that party. Like there were just moments in there I thought, there's no way that he can be completely clean. And even at the end, well, I know we'll probably get there, but when he goes in for that show taping, you could just tell there too, like everything is so impulsive. Like I know he's an impulsive person, but some of it, you just feel like he's not 100% there. So I'm curious to see how that all will unfold. What do you think, Sharronda?
I don't know. I think right now, I don't know if he's necessarily using, but I do feel as though that Kendall is crying out for help. I mean, if you think about it from the end of episode 2, all of his siblings left him. He thought that he would at least come out of the whole meeting that they had with at least one of the siblings on his side, preferably Shiv if he had his way. But now all of his siblings have actually abandoned him. And so I think that him being around all of these friends, him being in a relationship, that I truly believe deep down in his heart that he knows that she is not the right person for him, especially if he wants to stay on track with his recovery. I don't know. I think he's really he needs companionship. He needs to feel like somebody in the world supports him, since he's literally at war with every member of his family now.
But he's not helping his cause. Like, I don't think Greg would have called Tom and let Tom know that Kendall was coming in and given him a heads up if Kendall hadn't done that bullshit of like clearly making it seem like the watch was a gift to Greg and then suddenly be like, oh no, man, I said I'd hook you up. You know,
okay, can we talk about that scene real quick? That scene was so hilarious to me because I just felt for Greg, because that is probably something silly I would do too and say, oh, but I thought it was a gift. Like I would say Greg's reactions were so epic. I really enjoyed that scene. I mean, yes, I thought Kendall was crazy, but I felt poor Greg looking at this watch on his wrist and then his face, the way it dropped when he found out he had to pay for it and that it wasn't a gift. I don't know. I really enjoyed that moment.
I was shocked he actually paid for it. And then after that, the watch actually didn't work. So I'm just kind of confused. Like, what has happened? It's $40,000. You didn't want to make sure that the watch was working when you were trying it on?
Well, I think they were saying it does work. He just doesn't know how to like self-correct it. But I think he kind of got forced into buying it because he was arguing. He had showered, and you heard the guy in the background being like, it's your patina is on it, and eventually I think he got kind of forced into it. So yeah, I felt terrible for him.
And at the end, he makes that comment when they're at the show taping with the watch. He's like, I'm a humble custodian.
Yeah.
Right. That whole thing happening with him and the watch. So poor Greg. My heart just goes out to Greg every episode.
And then getting moved into like the mail room from his office, I felt it was like trash everywhere. I felt so bad for him.
Yeah, no, Tom is really putting them through it. I want to finish up on Kendall and then we're going to go to Greg and Tom. Let's talk about the show because so we have a guest star this episode. We have Z-Way, who has like her own show, the Z-Way Show. But in this series, she is called Sophie. And essentially she has basically been talking about Kendall through social media. He saw her do a bit, which was very awkward when he put it on for everyone. And then we see that she makes a comment that basically, I think she called it rich Caucasian brain disease, where essentially like they think that they're woke, they grew up with all the money in the world, but essentially they're just a jackass. And so this is like one of those moments when basically Kendall starts realizing that he's not a part of the joke, he's really the butt of the joke. And I really wanted to get your thoughts just basically on what she said about that, but also too, I do want to talk about when this statement is released. So because Kendall basically starts playing, she sets up all of these speakers. When Shiv, who's just been announced as president, she's given a speech and basically to talk about everything going on with Waystar. Essentially, he puts on a song called Rape by Nirvana. So in a way for Shiv to get back at him, she essentially writes a statement basically putting all his business out, that he was addicted to drugs, that he basically has relapsed, that he's not as committed to his recovery as everyone would think, how he's this absentee dad. He is really just breaking down at this point. I really want to get your thoughts on Kendall's reaction as we see him balled up before the raid happens.
Yeah, I don't know how Kendall comes back from all of this. This is all very humiliating. I do think the talk show host was spot on too. We saw him at the beginning of the episode, just like paparazzi come up and he goes, "Fuck the patriarchy." And it's like, dude, he is such a poser and he stands for nothing on any of these issues, but yet he thinks he's some kind of cultural revolutionary. But yeah, I mean, he could not have made that talk show hate him anymore if he tried. You know, his advisors told him not to go on there. He went anyway, and then he has this awkward confrontation with the writers where he's trying to like pressure them not to talk about things that make him uncomfortable. And then he doesn't even have the guts to go on the show. I mentioned I was disgusted by him. Playing the song, I know him and Shiv are on terrible terms, but that was so uniquely crass and tasteless that it really lost him a lot of points in my eyes. I can't, unless it turns out that someone within Waystar had actually done it to pit her against Kendall, which I do think is possible because we don't actually, have firm evidence that he did that. But yeah, I mean, he's I think been reduced to his lowest state. Everybody knows his dirty laundry's out there. He hasn't fully lost all of his siblings, but he's definitely lost Shiv. He's the butt of jokes. I mean, yes, we see the FBI raiding Waystar's offices. Maybe that gives him a leg up, but I don't see how he comes back. I mean, he's humiliated. He doesn't have support. I'm not even sure him being like the center of the Civil War is going to be able to last the entire season unless there's a meaningful defection to his camp.
Yeah, I feel bad for him actually, because I feel like he is at an utter loss at this point. I mean, okay, so we definitely know that hate relationship with Shiv, because we do kind of get an inkling, I think, that he did create that whole speaker issue because she walks into his office and she sees those empty boxes with the speakers, and then we see her spitting into what I think is a journal maybe. So I will never forget that face she made because you could just feel how disgusted she was with this man at that point. I thought it was interesting. Yeah, him just wanting to be on Sophia's show. She clearly is just knocking him down. She shares her disgust about him, is totally insulting towards him. And even throughout the entire show, I mean, she even mentions on her show that she was so ready to attack him when he came on. And now it sucks because he ghosted her and he's not going to even be on her show. I will tell you, I think the moment that was really touching for me was when we see him going in that, I guess not a control room, but where some of the equipment is. And you just see him sitting on the ground there, staring at his phone. Like at that moment, I felt really bad for him because I thought, wow, this guy is an utter mess. Like his life is completely falling apart. He really has no support physically, but even mentally. I don't even know if he's really conceptualizing what he's doing because like you mentioned too, that awkward interaction between him and the writer, and then him, first of all, going in strong, like I'm going to be on this show and I'm going to talk to her. And then all of a sudden chickening out. Like there's just so much instability with him. And I think a lot of that is happening up here.
Yeah, I'm wishing nothing but the best for Kendall. I just want Kendall to go to recovery. I want him to let all of this go. At this point, I just don't think that taking his father down is worth his own mental stability. And I just want healing for him. I want healing for him and all of his siblings with their like terrible daddy issues. But I guess let's finish up on Greg and Time because Time is kind of wilding out too this episode, and I'm just really confused as to why he wants to make himself the sacrificial lamb. In case anything goes down, he comes up with this idea after he is basically, after he harasses Greg when he comes into Greg's office, like, hey, hands up, FBI, playing jokes on him. But basically, he's torturing him, moving him to a horrible office. But he wants to invite him out with a guy. This is his retaliation from last week's episode of Greg basically making the decision not to go with the Waystar attorney. But he wants him to come with him for this meeting. Essentially, Greg ends up not going, but Tom's friend, who is, I guess, some type of counsel or just a friend trying to hear the situation that he's in. But when we see him come home and then Shiv comes home and she asks how the meeting went, he basically tells her that there's no way that if this goes out of Logan's favor that he can basically avoid jail time. So because Tom is basically pressed and he thinks that this is going to follow him anyway, he comes up with this idea that he's going to go to Logan and he's going to tell Logan like, hey, if you need a fall guy, I will be that person. And Shiv is just like, you're drunk, chill out, like it's not that deep. But then the wheels start spinning in her head, and this just adds to their very dysfunctional marriage. Then she starts saying, like, actually, that's a genius idea. So I want to give your thoughts on Tom basically saying that he's going to sacrifice himself for Logan. What are your thoughts about this?
I'm confused, guys. I was going to ask you about that because I don't understand why he would do that. I mean, I think he himself is really going through a lot right now because at the end of the day, we had talked about this in the last show too, that he is, I think, at the bottom of the pole, at the bottom of this chain, right? Because the kid, Logan is always going to look for his kids first. I mean, Tom is the son-in-law. So I actually was confused as to why he would do that. I mean, would that cut jail time for him or would that kind of help him out in the long run? I'm trying to figure out what's going on in Tom's mind because for me, like, honestly, I'm a little confused as why he would do that. And I would say he's so mean because that desk scene that you were talking about, Sharronda, where he goes into Greg's office and he puts those pills, he calls them cyanide pills. And like freaks out poor Greg and they're just like mints. And I'm like, oh my God, you're so mean to him. You demote him with this office and then you give him these pills saying, yeah, cyanide pills are going to be the only option. And, you know, poor innocent Greg, his wheels are already turning on how to get out of this situation. So yeah, I'd love to hear what you two think because I'm really confused at what Tom's true intention is at this point.
Yeah, I think, you know, what he mentioned in the conversation is like he definitely thinks that he'll get leniency like he was basically told no matter what you're going to jail,
right.
And he knows that like because he's not blood, Logan wouldn't protect him. So I mean, he's making a calculation. If I'm going to go to jail, no matter what, the prosecutors are much more likely to throw me a bone, cut me a deal if I preemptively basically confess and make myself the lamb. Not to mention down the line, Logan will probably use his clout to make sure once I get out of jail that I'm to some degree taken care of financially. I don't think it's out of loyalty to Logan at all. I don't think it's out of loyalty for Shiv at all because clearly, you know, not everything's not great between them. I think he knows he's going to jail. He's not going to be protected. And, you know, he just wants to cover his ass as much as possible. And, you know, he said he could be out in under a year if he confesses versus if it goes, you know, if it becomes a full investigation, then he'll be Logan's fall boy ultimately. And who knows how long he's looking at. 5
Well, why
years
harass
more.
Greg with him in that?
I mean, because Greg knows. I mean, Greg was with Tom. He knows exactly about the papers, like what happened to the papers, you know, what everything said. So I just think at this point, what everyone has been doing these first 3 episodes, everyone is basically assessing their options. We see that, you know, after he has that conversation with Logan the next day at work, that he calls and makes an appointment. He might be getting himself an attorney in order for him to make sure that his own self-interests are protected. Because also, too, for the past 3 episodes, Shiv and Tom, they have not been fully honest with one another. It's like they kind of know the moves that each other are making and they consult other people before they actually go and tell one another, you know, what they're actually going to decide to do. So I think at this point, Tom is just out for himself. I mean, Logan kind of gave him like oh, thanks, son. Like, thank you for, you know, sacrificing yourself. But it didn't even seem like Logan was even moved by what Tom was willing to do for him.
I don't think Logan's ever moved.
No, I thought he genuinely seemed taken aback that Logan wasn't asked or that Tom wasn't asking for something. Like, I felt like his thank you was some of the most like sincere emotion we've seen, as opposed to his interactions with his various kids, like when he's just trying to get them to say something nice about him publicly. I think he was. I'll be interested to see how this pans out because whereas he practically has to wring out endorsements from his biological kids, this will endear Tom to him more, and maybe unwittingly Tom has laid the groundwork for him to benefit from Logan down the line because I think Logan is going to trust him more now.
But you know what? I think it's really interesting, especially since we just showed the photo, that I never actually overanalyzed until now that we actually see Tom on Kendall's side with Greg. And who's to say that, you know, after, you know, what happened, especially when he's interrupted in his meeting with all of the heads of the departments in ATN, where essentially like they're being raided. So I think this is really going to shake things up for everyone. I think this is the point where we're actually going to see more people switching sides. But yeah, I mean, I don't give Logan that much credit for actually being grateful for anyone doing something for him. You can tell he was weirded out because he was like, well, what do you want in return? Like, you don't want anything? Like, that just doesn't make sense to him. But you know what, Will? I would love to be proven wrong that Logan has a heart. I would love to be proven wrong on that.
I almost feel like he can't ever express himself, you know? Like he's just got this guarded thing. I mean, there's even that scene with him and Roman, right? They're doing all this publicity stunts with the kid, that like having those conversations about maybe the kids adding, oh, their loving relationship with their dad. And you'll notice at every point, the kids have nothing to share. And every question that even journalists or anybody who's prepping them wants to share, they're like, nope. There's that scene with Roman. He just is anything about him and dad. He's just like, nope, I don't want to do this. And finally, he shares this fun story that we don't even know the whole thing about, where I guess he went fish flying or flying fish.
Yeah.
Right?
Fly fishing in Montana.
Yes, but which doesn't really even end up being with Logan. It's something that happened with Connor, but he's just threw it out. And you see that interaction with Logan and him, where he's like, son, when was that? And he's like, oh, yeah, one of those. He just said it in such a clever way, like it was one of those scenes that can be used for any publicity stunt. So I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, but I mean, let's talk a little bit deeper about the relationships. I mean, we get to see a lot about Shiv and Logan's relationship this episode. And really, I think Logan feels as though he's losing his hold that he necessarily has on Shiv. Even after last week when he gives her like the president position because he sees that she's upset, and in an effort, this is me just being negative about Logan, in an effort for him to stop Shiv from jumping ship going to Kendall's side, essentially he offers her this role of being president. And like we said last week, is to basically watch Jerry. But we see that this causes a little bit of friction between them. And I want to talk more about the conversation that Shiv has with Logan after she comes home from the event they basically force her to go to. And he basically is playing mind games and manipulation with her. Like, I just feel like my daughter doesn't love me, that she doesn't trust me. Like, you don't even want to hug me. And let's not forget that she had a picture of Saddam Hussein as the picture.
So funny.
I think that talks a lot about the state of Shiv and Logan's relationship. So, Will, tell me, how are you feeling about kind of this back and forth mind games that they're playing on each other?
Well, so, you know, you mentioned trying to like lure her back in with the job, but that's the reason I was a little bit suspicious about if Kendall actually did that, which, you know, we see he's being unstable. It's, you know, it's a clear strategic move, but strategically bad move, but maybe he's crazy enough to do it. But, you know, Logan set up this event for Shiv to speak. He's concerned about her wavering with him. You know, there's a whole thing about like, you're my only daughter. My only daughter won't speak in my behalf. And then immediately after that happens, he comes in and is like, now don't you see who he really is? Like, it did kind of seem like, if I'm Logan and I'm afraid of her wavering, I am going to stage something so transparently humiliating that she will be fully won over to my camp, which is why I do have an inkling. And yeah, the packaging was in his office, but I mean, it's Logan's building. He could have had people, you know, put the packaging in there. So I do think it's possible that Logan staged that to bring her firmly to his side, because, you know, his emotional bullying clearly wasn't working with the whole just, you're my only daughter.
But didn't he sent security to go run errands and pick up some stuff for him? Like, before all of that happened.
He did, yeah. But we don't know what. I mean, like, it seems like it probably was. I'm just thinking that maybe there could be some misdirection. Like, you know.
I definitely think those sneakers could have been planted, those boxes could have been planted by Logan in Kendall's office.
Yeah.
I think it's Kendall. I mean, I felt like if it wasn't, he would have called her because he was in the building. They were streaming it on all the TVs in the building. I felt like he would have called and told her, like, that was not me. Like, I didn't do that. Even though he was missing from his office, but it had to have made the news what happened at the town hall. I don't know. I'm just trying to, I do feel like Kendall has that fight in him. I feel like he's capable of playing a trick like that on her.
Oh, he's definitely, yeah. I mean, this episode definitely showed he's capable in crass enough to do that. But, you know, It's just a possibility. You know, I may be overthinking it, and Kendall's just a true dick.
Interesting possibility, though. That didn't even come to my mind because I was like, no, I feel like Kendall is able and very capable of doing something like this. And going back to Shiv and Logan, I think it's so interesting that Logan is just doing anything he can to hold on to her. Any little thing, because there is that missing link of where you've got this father-daughter dynamic where she's still has always craved for that love and is searching for that. But there was a moment too in that conversation between the two of them. I felt like she was about to say something about the company or just what was happening. And he just kind of shut her up. Like he gave her this look where then she just was like, oh, okay, yeah, I trust you. And I believe you. And he's again trying to just sell her on, well, like, look, I'm clean. Look, I haven't really done anything wrong. There's no paperwork on this and blah, 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 blah. So it's so interesting how he plays these mind games, but I feel like he's really going above and beyond to try to convince her that Kendall is this huge monster and that he really needs Shiv to be on his side. And I just feel, for her, there's these insecurities in her too, where whether it's love from her dad or this position of president, she's just trying to grasp onto something to give her that confidence of who she is and what she means to this company and family.
Yeah, I mean, even when they're having this conversation, her dad, because they're going back and forth about, she's like, so do you know what actually happened? Like, are they going to find something? And then essentially he was like, he's like, yeah, there's some bad apples. Like what company doesn't have bad apples? But he's like, there's not a piece of paper that you will find that will ever make you ashamed of me. And so it's almost like he's trying to convince his children to still love him, even though he doesn't understand that based on last week's episode, they all stayed with him, even though they feel like it's a losing side because they don't want any harm to actually come to their father. Like Connor said, I don't want to kill him. I don't want this decision to kill my dad. So I'm just going to stick it out with him no matter which way it goes. So, what do you think the relationship is going to be with Shiv and Logan? Because also too, we see at the event where Kendall is like, oh my God, it's you now. You are basically me from where we met Kendall in season 1. So I want to get your thoughts, on where do you see this whole relationship between Shiv and Logan going for the rest of the season?
Yeah, I think Logan, is very cynical, and I think he's already, they make it very clear that he's getting increasingly anxious about Jerry. He was upset that she had the audacity to do any actual CEO duties in this episode and was trying to shut down some expansion to Israel that she was trying to work on already. And, I think Logan is cynical enough to think that for public relations reasons, he's going to need to put a woman in charge. And if it's not going to be Jerry, he's definitely probably thinking, okay, it can be Shiv, and I can manipulate her probably more than I can manipulate Jerry. So I think that's definitely what he's leaning towards with this. But yeah, I mean, also, I think he is upset that, this episode seems to be a lot about people realizing that they suck and trying to deny that. We see Shiv getting upset when being told basically like you're a phony. He's upset when he realizes kids don't love him, and Kendall is clearly realizing he sucks. So, it's just a lot of people looking inward and trying to hide their insecurities. And yeah, I mean, Logan, she was always the one who didn't want to be a part of his world. And I think that still wounds him. And so every time she looks like she's leaving, he just has to bring her in. So it's his emotional vulnerability, but it's also potentially a good, shrewd strategy.
They need group therapy is what I think. It's mind games for him, because I think as much as he loves his children or whatever incy-bincy wit he's got left in him, there's still that thing of Logan's going to look out for Logan first. I don't think love really holds that much over the power, the money, the success. So he, again, just constantly is always doing, bringing Shiv in as president, trying to give her, like, I feel like he gives her these cookie crumbs to make her feel like she's important. And, for her, again, she's got it, like you mentioned, Sharronda, she has a dysfunctional marriage, and we've been seeing that. And I feel like she doesn't have that fatherly figure in her world that she would want. And so she's trying to always, try to still be there for dad, trying to do what she can do. And yeah, well, like she don't want to be a part of this world. And now she's kind of sucked in, and I feel she is trying to do her best to still somehow make this company succeed and try to change it. I felt like when she had that conversation with Kendall at that event, there was a little bit in her that kind of felt a little honest if she wants to make that change. So I don't know. I feel like a part of her, as we're going to go into the next episodes, she's still going to try to prove herself because she wants to be that Shiv, that she wants to be that daughter that she feels her father can, trust in and rely on.
Yeah, I mean, I think we might start to see Shiv become a little bit frazzled, right? Like all of the pressure that Kendall put on himself in the first season, where we saw lead to his downfall, we see that Shiv is just as upset because Kendall or Logan, time will tell us eventually who is responsible for the music playing. But now we see that she's upset because everyone has always doubted her, like you said, because she's the only person who doesn't have the actual experience. But before we wrap things up, I do want to ask you about Jerry, because Jerry was very frustrated this episode. We know that Logan has basically made her a pawn as CEO, and he still expects to be playing all of the strings of his new puppets that he has in Jerry and in Shiv and Roman. But I want to get your thoughts from where we find Jerry at the beginning of the episode, when she's basically still acting as her normal, self as counsel, but at the end where she basically tells him, look, the FBI is downstairs. This is exactly what I told you what was going to happen, but you wanted to keep ignoring me, and now you need to play ball. So she kind of gets, she takes back her dominance of actually being CEO. So Will, I want to get your thoughts on what we see from Jerry, and how long do you think she's actually going to survive as CEO this season?
Yeah, I think it's going to be interesting. He made the insane decision when he was subpoenaed to tell them to go fuck themselves, despite her advising him not to. Yeah, I think he's definitely going to remove her as CEO, and I think she's immediately going to cooperate with the feds. Like, I think it's definitely going to that direction. That's going to be a big thorn in his side, because there's no way he's going to keep her in that position with her trying to exercise autonomy. So, and then, she had told Roman last episode that, like, you have no idea what, like, a formidable enemy I can be. I think that's very true. She's very smart. She knows a lot of Logan's dirty laundry. And now that the feds are, like, genuinely in play, I think that's going to be, before the end of the season, that's going to be her move, with her becoming one of the biggest witnesses against Logan that this investigation can have.
Will, I feel like that line was so telling, actually, when I heard that line too. I said, ooh, is she going to change on him? But here's the thing. I think she's going to stick in there and hang in there until, of course, he lets her go. Because I almost feel like she's so powerful in her own mind, and she feels that she does deserve this, that she is going to hang in there. Because, when I watch her interaction, and you see Logan constantly disrespecting her. Like, he's always bringing her down. He's always insulting her, especially in this episode. I really saw it more when they were in his office. And I feel like she just takes it, but she comes back and punches him right back and saying, no, this is the FBI. You can't tell them to fuck off. You can't do this. You can't do that. So she's really holding her ground as long as she can. And especially like playing a little bit of those mind games with Roman. But at the same time, she's going to hang in there until he lets her go. But yeah, I'm with you on that, Will. I wouldn't be surprised if she takes the side of the feds once Logan screws her over.
It's funny you mentioned, like, the history of him just disrespecting her, because it kind of explains why she's in that weird situation with Roman. I kind of think, where he's, like, jerking off while she just berates him. I feel like she's using him as, like, a proxy for Logan, just to, like, spew all of the things she wishes she could say to Logan instead to his progeny. So, seeing this episode and how he just debases her definitely gave a little more context to why she would enter in kind of a weird relationship with one of his kids like that.
Look, I'm betting my money on Jerry. I'm always going to side with Jerry. She's held her own this whole time with Logan. She's watched all of these kids basically grow up and make their mistakes as well. So I'm very interested to see the puzzle piece that Jerry is going to play. But let's get into our favorite pieces of dialogue this episode. I think that I will have to say that Connor gave me my favorite line of dialogue after Shiv is basically trying to bully both Roman and Connor into signing this terrible statement against their brother Kendall, when basically he tells her to suck on my dicky dick. I don't know what the obsession is with dick in the cast of Succession, how many times it is said every episode, but I think that is my favorite line from this week. Rasha, how about you?
I liked, and I wrote this down here, he's bootleg Ross with the daddy complex. This was one of the tweets when they were going in that limo drive, and this was the bad tweet. So that line got me.
Will?
Yeah, there were a couple of Romans I thought were really funny. One of them was, they have this slogan of we get it. And he's like, yeah, just like those dancers on the cruise ships got it. And then Shiv says some comment about
was it for the "We Got It" slogan?
Yeah, we got it. Yeah. And then Shiv also makes some comment about Roman's just letting everyone on the football team finger bang him for lunch money, and then he's like, "Stop projecting your own childhood onto me." I was like, "Ooh, yeah." So I loved a couple of his barbs this week for sure.
I think Roman always has some of the best lines of each episode. Even though I feel like we didn't get as much from Roman as I would have liked to this episode, but this is mainly about Shiv and Logan's relationship for this week. But what do you think that we're going to see in these upcoming episodes? Now that the FBI has raided Waystar, where do we go from here?
Yeah, I'm curious to see when some of the big guest actors are going to make an appearance. I know Adrian Brody is supposed to show up at some point. And I think one of the Skarsgårds shows up at some point too. So I'm going to be curious to see what role they play. I think they're both supposed to be rival financiers or something. I'm still curious to see what Frank's doing. I wonder if he is someone who could shift. One of you guys mentioned that Tom could consider jumping ship. I do think that's possible. There's that moment where Kendall's like, there's a place for you with me, which is creepy, but it seems like it's laying the groundwork for something. Yeah, I don't know at this point. It definitely went in directions I didn't think this episode, with Kendall just looking pathetic and incapable of mustering support by him, but then being counterbalanced with the FBI actually seizing documents. I don't know how they walk this off. Either him or Logan. It really opens the door for neither of them being in power sustainably, and they're gonna have to step aside for someone, just because both of the things that happened to them in the end of this episode are going to be so debilitating for their continued leadership positions.
I almost feel like they're going to have to rely on someone else to come in to rescue them. I don't even know if that's a possibility, but I think between the FBI raid, Shiv putting that tweet out about her brother needing help and leaving the family alone, and then that scene with him, Kendall on the floor there, and not wanting to go on the show, were very telling, and it's interesting. Yeah, I'm curious to see how it unfolds, because I feel like they are really at a big boiling point right now with this company and their relationships. And right now it can go either way. So yeah, I'm interested to see on how they get out of this mess, to be honest with you, especially with that FBI raid.
Look, I am going with Jerry, who is just prophesizing everything that's going to happen this season. And I truly believe when she told Roman last episode that this is potentially going to end up with the entire family losing the company. I truly believe that that's probably going to come to fruition towards the end of this season 3. But I'm rolling with Jerry. I'm just going to stick with Jerry the rest of this ride, because I feel like she was giving us some gems of what to expect in this season.
Right, but let's see what happens.
But yeah, she obviously should run the company. She's so clearly more qualified.
Most qualified.
Yeah.
Team Jerry, I'm just adding a third team into this. But that is pretty much it for this week's Succession After Show recap. Will and Rasha, can you please tell all of our viewers where can they find you on social media?
Yes, you can find me everywhere at Rasha Goel.
One last thought. I thought that was an absolute banger that Nicholas Britell ends the episode with. There's a new track that plays as the FBI comes in, and then you come back to see Kendall watching it, and then it goes into the credits. I just like sat there just listening to it, letting the credits roll for like 3 minutes afterwards. It's so good. There's a swelling orchestra rendition mix up of the theme. I thought it's so good, and I can't wait for that to be on Spotify. You can find me on Twitter at Mavericks Movies.
You can find me on social media at Pay Your Weight. But that is pretty much this week's episode. I just want to thank Will and Rasha for always hanging through with me every single week as we recap every episode of Succession. Please make sure that you're subscribed to our channel and that you come back next week as we break down episode 4. So I hope everyone has a happy Halloween and enjoy the rest of your evening. Bye.